Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian Garcia Gonzalez with the MITRE Corporation. Today, I'm here to present the Defending Operational Technology with Attack research project that was brought and developed by the Center for Threat Informed Defense last summer. In today's agenda, we'll be going over the methodology, the attack workbench, where we stored our threat collection, the project website with all the resources for the Defending OT with Attack project, as well as going lightly over our cyber tabletop exercise based on the 2022 Ukraine electric power plant attack. So, the Defending OT with Attack project was born out of the need for organizations to understand the full breadth and depth of the various adversarial techniques that could be used against operational technology, whether it's impacting the IT infrastructure or the OT infrastructure. Our approach is to develop a straightforward methodology to understand which adversarial techniques are being leveraged, as well as which ones are applicable, and evaluate the various impact. Finally, we hope to provide the full set of techniques, regardless of the complexity of the architecture of your operational technology infrastructure. So the need for defending OT for attack was born out of seeing the risks are more prevalent in the industry. As is reported by Mandiant, attackers don't really respect the theoretical boundaries between the enterprise IT infrastructure and the interconnected technologies in the ICS/OT infrastructure. Additionally, we're seeing the adversary is refining their tradecraft and their skill set and their tools to impact these OT ICS environments, as been reported by the FBI, DHS, and the Cybersecurity Advisory. And finally, as reported by IBM, we're seeing that the cost of a data breach affecting critical infrastructure has been getting more and more expensive, reaching $5 million, just over $5 million in 2023. So the combination of the interconnected technologies, the adversary becoming better and better in impacting these technologies, as well as the growing cost, is really what prompted this research project. Our approach to solve the problem was more or less by capturing and refining three deliverables that I'd like to go over today. First and foremost is understanding our threat model methodology. This is the approach to understand the various technologies that form part of your attack surface in a hybrid IT OT environment, whether they are architectural assets that are commonplace as Windows devices, Active Directory domain controllers, virtual machines, etc. Second is being able to capture that threat collection in a shareable format that could continue to grow as new technologies come into place and as new threat intelligence comes online. That's where we leverage CTID's attack workbench, which allowed us to create a shareable knowledge base and allow the team to collaborate with this tool. And finally, the project website. Here's where we captured all the information to share with the industry, the resources, the various knowledge, and really help promote this kind of effort that would benefit various stakeholders regardless of your critical infrastructure footprint. So the Defending OT with Attack methodology was a 5-step approach. This was prior developed under Defending Infrastructure as a Service with Attack. And the first step and most important was identifying your attack surface. This would allow organizations and the various personnel and subject matter experts to better understand the assets, the security boundaries, and the technologies and relevant risks for that form part in their architecture at the various levels. Second was, and step 2 is compiling your sources. This would be capturing the relevant cyber threat intelligence data sets to help provide that comprehensive picture of what adversary techniques could impact which assets depending on the various technologies in scope. Step 3 is defining the criteria. This would provide our threat analysts with clear guidance when evaluating what's feasible or what is not applicable based on the asset, whether it's a virtualized machine, a physical machine, or an ICS device. Step 4 is understanding and selecting the techniques for each asset. This is the threat curation part, which is the step before being able to complete the final threat collection. And finally, step 5 is building your threat collection. This is the final step in packaging the various knowledge and being able to share it throughout your organization with all the relevant cyber subject matter experts. So step one is identifying your attack surface. And as you see, this is our methodology for the defending OT with attack um, reference architecture. So in this reference architecture, we see there are 5 levels, and these were based on the Purdue Enterprise Reference Architecture model, which would allow the various assets based on security boundaries and what is relevant technologies as is prescribed in industry based on known frameworks and security standards. So at the level 0, we will see assets such as field devices, circuit breakers, process sensors, and other technologies that manage the physical processes themselves. This is equipment that's under control of whatever your critical infrastructure is providing. At the level 1 is the process level. This is where you'll see assets such as the data gateway, local human machine interface, field controllers, safety engineering workstations, IEDs, remote terminal units, etc. And this is as well where we start seeing networking equipment that's going to be standard place across all levels. And this layer, we're seeing a modem and a switch. At the level 2 is our control level, where we'll see SCADA control servers, the operator human machine interface, DCS control servers, operator HMIs, as well as a switch at the network level. At the level 3 is where we start seeing a combination of more IT technologies as well as the ICS technology. So here we see engineering workstations, we see OT hypervisors, the application server that hosts them, the data historian, which would be the database for various of the technologies at the lower levels, as well as the OT domain controller, your authentication mechanism, and as well as more networking equipment. At this layer, we start seeing routers. At layer 3.5, which isn't commonplace in the Purdue model, but is becoming more relevant in later research and publications, is where we would see the jump host data historian mirror to back up what the data historian at the lower level, file servers, application servers to help update the infrastructure, as well as a firewall and VPN servers. And finally, the enterprise level. This is where we see your commonplace IT infrastructure. So this could include VPN servers, web servers, mail servers, potentially cloud services that various operators may be leveraging, enterprise workstations, IDAM servers, as well as everything that's internet connected, hence the firewall, switch, router, and the common networking technologies. So this was our approach to identify an attack surface for operational technology. And the next step, once we have the threat landscape, is leveraging various cyber threat intelligence, as we see in step 2, compile sources, to generate that comprehensive picture of what adversary risk are applicable to each asset that we see listed in the reference architecture to the right. The next step for our threat analysts was defining the criteria. So this would be the guidance to help evaluate what's feasible and what's not applicable for each one of these assets. This would be the curation part. So whether it's a Windows machine, Linux machine, container, virtualized machine, these will have different attack vectors, and hence we would have different technologies and attack risks. Step 4 would be selecting the techniques themselves. So our team leveraged MITRE's attack framework to evaluate various techniques from various data sets, cloud, container, software, ICS, to name a few, to be able to curate the final adversarial risk for each asset. Once we've created this soft list, then it was about finalizing the threat collection by building it in our attack workbench tool. Here's a glimpse of the attack workbench tool. This was a tool developed under a prior CTID project, and it's really a great a tool to help not only containerize the attack knowledge base with the latest revision of attack, but also annotate, make comments, and collaborate with your threat analysts to provide a better picture of the technologies, the attack risks, and potential mitigations, as we're seeing here. In our case, we leverage the assets tab themselves to be able to recreate every asset in our reference architecture and then correlate these to the various attack risks. This is the attack workbench screenshot that includes all the various assets in our reference architecture, as well as the attack adversarial risk that we correlated to each one of these assets. Our resulting threat collection was 21 assets, 9 of which included a combination of, or an overlap really, of attack for ICS and attack for enterprise. The total collection was a combined 692 techniques from both enterprise and attack for ICS datasets, which was 251 parent techniques and 441 uh, sub techniques of the parents. As you see in the screenshot, this includes all 21 assets, VPN servers, jump host, RTUs, what have you. And as you click on the tool, you will be able to find the criteria, the justification for the selection of various adversarial risk, and potential exclusion from these. These were again based on, was it a virtualized asset? Is it a enterprise asset? Was there a potential overlap? And the ones that we noticed having that overlap, for example, were the jump hosts that seemed to have overlap, as well as the router at the OT level, as that seems to be touching some other technologies, thus expanding the attack vectors and relevant attack techniques. So this was our defending OT with attack threat collection. The threat collection itself can be downloaded on the website and shared throughout your organization, and the attack workbench tool is available for download from GitHub. uh, that would again allow folks to create their own threat collections, add new assets, as well as update these based on the latest cyber threat intelligence and new revisions of the attack knowledge base. So we've gone over the reference architecture, we've gone over the attack workbench tool. The next deliverable was our project website. So here's where we captured our 5-step methodology for creating this threat model, as well as generating our reference architecture, the 21 assets in our reference architecture, examples of those technologies, as well as the threat collection that could be downloaded as an Excel file, a sticks form, and a sticks file, and as well as various use cases and a cyber tabletop exercise. This was a stretch goal for the project, and it was our approach to really understand if this would be applicable in the real world. We see here on the bottom left, ctid.io/defending-ot. This is the project website, and again, we encourage all to go and review the resources, download the various threat collections, and just become more aware and possibly share throughout your corporation. This is our cyber tabletop exercise. This scenario was based on the 2022 Ukraine electric power plant attack. And this was our approach to ask not only our threat analysts, but as well as our collaborating organizations that were part of this research effort to help evaluate the effectiveness of the reference architecture, the attack framework, and potential defense capabilities that could help mitigate a similar threat for another similar infrastructure. So at a high level, we saw it was a 4-step approach uh, based on 20 more or less attack techniques. The first step would be that initial access. Reason to believe that Sandworm team, the Russian APT that's responsible for this attack, was able to gain initial access by abusing a potential 0-day on a firewall device or a VPN server. That would be an exploit public facing application. And again, probably based on poor patching. In the next step, we saw them establish persistence in the VPN server. That would be the second red box at the top of the level 4, level 5, which again allowed them to establish persistence in case something or someone were to find them and eradicate them. In this level, they were able to harvest credentials, administrative credentials, which is what allowed them to start laterally moving, which is the next step of our high-level approach, to laterally move from the IT infrastructure to the OT infrastructure. So likely leveraging the jump host at the OT DMZ with those administrative credentials allowed them to move further and infiltrate to the level 3 and past the DMZ, gain access to that lower level environment. At this level is where we noticed a the hypervisor was potentially compromised, the OT hypervisor, and this was compromised by installing a virtual machine that allowed script to automatically execute. The adversary, in this case again Sandworm, was able to install a virtual machine that had a script with a text file that automatically executed when it was installed. This SCADA control server is that VM that was installed at the level 2, which when it came online automatically ran the script. The script then sent commands to the IAD relay at the level 1, telling the field device to shut off the circuit breaker. So we have level 1 initial access, level 2 infiltration and lateral movement into the environment, and level 3 now disrupting services with that script that shut off power. At the next step is where we saw the APT impact forensics by deploying malware that would impact every Windows machine in the environment by overwriting hard drives and thus affecting forensics that would allow them to decompose what actually happened. So there were 20 attack techniques observed more or less in this campaign, and I will be going over one of those techniques as we ran through in our cyber tabletop exercise. So this is the last step in our cyber tabletop exercise. And as you see in the title, it was data destruction targeting Microsoft Enterprise workstations and Microsoft servers. As we see in the top left, the description, that's straight from the attack framework. And this is where adversaries may destroy data in files on systems to render data irrecoverable, telemetry more or less, to impact forensic techniques by overwriting files or data on all local and remote drives. In this specific campaign, we saw the Russian APT Sandworm deployed malware called Caddywiper on the victim's IT environment and systems to wipe those files related to OT capabilities, map drives, and physical drive partitions. So what we see here in red would be more or less the attack technique, as well as the specific behavior observed in this campaign. The bottom left, we see potential mitigations. This would be data backup is one of the recommendations to help bring your environment back online and help protect from a similar technique. And we saw a bit more comprehensive data sources being recommended to help detect sooner. The kind of data sources that should be monitored would be command execution, file deletions, file modifications, creating new process, volume deletions, image deletions, and cloud storage deletions. These are recommended again to help detect sooner any potential adversarial risk and thus alert your cyber analysts of nefarious activity in your environment. So this was one of the 20 steps observed and or 20 attack techniques observed in this specific campaign. And this is where our approach of not only capturing the offensive behavior, but as well as the mitigations that should be considered for this specific attack technique. Our hope is that various organizations and personnel could help better evaluate the various assets that could be impacted if you have the right mitigations in place and if you have the right data sources that need to be monitored to help capture that sooner. So this was our approach at not only better understanding a real world scenario, but also putting our reference architecture to the test to ensure that it would be applicable in a real world environment. So some of the lessons learned from our tabletop exercise were on the offensive side. We can't ignore historical attacks. We can't overlook vulnerabilities and attack vectors. This was one campaign that was observed by Sandworm, but they've been successful in 3 instances in affecting Ukrainian power plants. So again, it may be important to not only look at one specific campaign, 28 techniques, but it may be more important to look at what other techniques and similar behaviors that your adversary or potential adversary targeting your infrastructure could leverage to impact your environment. Second, if a hands-on adversary emulation exercise isn't conducted, we're not sure of the effectiveness of the security controls or your detection analytics. So this could be a great first step to understand a relevant scenario, but also to help guide future hands-on exercises to really test your defensive capabilities, response times by your team, and what could be a gap in your defense and depth infrastructure. In terms of the defensive takeaways, we think it's critical to have a threat-informed approach of what the adversary is doing to help understand the effectiveness of various security controls and consideration for other security controls in your environment to minimize the risk of successful cyber attacks in the future. Second, some of the takeaway was that you need to properly baseline the security controls in your environment, as well as really capture the various data sources that need to be monitored to help detect threat actor behavior a bit sooner. What we noticed in Sandworm's 2022 electric power plant attack was there's about a 2-month dwell time between the initial access to when the actual disruption of services occurred. So there is potential to capture this type of nefarious activity a lot sooner if you have the right mitigations in place, and if you have the right knowledge for your threat hunting team or security analyst team to be able to go proactively look for this kind of nefarious behavior. And finally, the lack of privileged account management, as we noticed with the harvesting a credential, the lack of multi-factor authentication, and the ability for installation of virtual machines was really critical in this campaign. So inadequate network segmentation, improper authentication mechanisms just increases the risk of unauthorized access, lateral movement, and it just leads to potential widespread compromise of a data breach just by impacting and compromising the credentials of one user. So the Defending OT with Attack research project, we've identified a few practical use cases that industry could leverage. First and foremost is threat intelligence mapping. Here's where we can leverage the full knowledge base of the attack framework to understand all IT and OT related techniques based on the mapping, as well as describing the various adversary activities during each step of those security events, as well as understanding the impact of that technique on assets or across assets in your environment. So again, this could be used as more threat intelligence comes online to better understand the latest techniques and how your organization is prepared to defend against them. Next was security architecture and operations. In this use case, we see organizations being able to identify key security control gaps for systems and their environments, as well as ability to start developing better detection analytics for adversary activity based on certain malware strains, as we saw with Caddywiper, or other malware being used, as well as planning response activities in case one of these were to happen in your specific environment. Third, we see this as helping support red teaming and penetration testing engagements by being able to tailor your reference architecture and the threat collection to your specific environment, as well as conducting strategic adversarial simulations that are more representative of what's being observed in the real world and evaluate that risk across your attack surface. So empowering your red team and your offensive analysts with better knowledge of the IT OT domain. And finally, more cyber tabletop exercises. Not only did we see the ability to identify various assets that could be impacted and the relevant techniques in this exercise, but we also see the potential to assess these adversarial risk across multiple domains in IT and OT, and also just evaluate the effectiveness of your security capabilities, whether it's mitigating via protection, detection, and understanding better response. So some of the advantages gained by role is, again, we're seeing the offensive cyber analysts now have a comprehensive threat collection for IT OT to evaluate what adversary emulation scenarios could be used and what red team techniques could be leveraged to impact various assets. Second, this should empower security administrators. Now they would have an improved threat-informed process when considering mitigating security controls across the enterprise environment and helping prioritize certain security capabilities, as we noticed with need for better authentication and privilege account management in this campaign. We also see this research as being able to empower threat hunters, because now you have a proactive framework to identify potential data sources for each asset, as well as develop attack-based analytics for the potential techniques that could be observed. And finally, cyber leadership. This should empower cyber leadership with threat-informed decision-making to help during acquisition to address those key risk areas, help redirect personnel, considering policies, technological upgrades, or other third-party security tools and capabilities that are needed to be better prepared against the latest and greatest threat. This was our approach to providing the community with a threat-informed decision-making approach for operational technology. Again, we're seeing this as critical to understanding adversarial behaviors that could be used against your environment, as well as help with foundational strategizing when evaluating, planning, and implementing potential defensive measures. On the offensive side, we better understand how to define the adversarial risk for the IT infrastructure, enterprise systems, as well as operational technologies. And this is really critical to quantify which assets and technologies comprise your entire attack surface, then correlate all of these to cyber threat intelligence as we did with the attack framework. On the defensive side, we see this as being able to empower organizations with better strategies, strengthening and evolving your cyber defenses. This would allow them to assess organizational defense and depth and the security capabilities that can be used to protect, detect, and respond for each one of these real-world adversary behaviors observed in this campaign or in any other campaign that you are to consider. So this was our deliverables for defending OT with attack to help provide the community with threat-informed defense for enterprise and ICS. Our first deliverable was the methodology. That's our 5-step process and our reference architecture that allowed us to have a better understanding of the threat landscape by identifying technologies and assets that form part of a hybrid IT-OT architecture that will help focus what specific techniques malicious threat actors could use. Second was the tool attack workbench that allowed us to capture all this knowledge of relevant assets as well as adversarial risk for each one of these assets. This would allow it for a hybrid architecture and a complex architecture, but also to export this information in a shareable format with others. Third was the project website. This is where we shared resources, findings, and knowledge with industry to help benefit stakeholders and being able to share with others and build upon these or leverage these resources as is. And finally, the cyber tabletop exercise. This was where we really tested the resources developed in our reference architecture with a real world campaign and better understanding of how this could be leveraged, this knowledge base could be leveraged to mitigate even the most advanced of persistent threats, especially as was observed with the Sandworm team. So that was our Defending OT with Attack project research. I'd like to thank you and would encourage you all to go visit the website where again you can download all these files and share with others and build upon them as you see fit. Thank you very much for your time.